At 30,000 feet, laughter filled the cabin as flight attendants mocked a black woman's natural curls like it was entertainment. What they didn't know was that the woman they humiliated was the federal scientist who built the system watching them. One calm command from her would ground an entire airline and force a nation to reckon with the true meaning of dignity. The television room at the Federal Aviation Administration was nearly empty when the first alert came in. A red banner scrolled across the bottom of the muted screen. Emergency suspension. Silverwing Airlines grounded pending federal review. The night shift operator stopped his coffee halfway to his lips. The only sound was the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint static of breaking news. Cameras flashed on another screen. Images of a woman standing alone outside the terminal, her short curls catching the pale glow of the floodlights. She wasn't speaking. She didn't need to. The silence around her spoke louder than any headline. At that same hour, far across the city, an old man cleaning the concourse floor turned up the volume on his small radio. The announcer's voice trembled as he read the statement again. An entire airline suspended. The cause listed simply as violation of federal dignity regulations. The janitor muttered, "Lord, what kind of thing brings down an airline overnight?" Then he paused when he heard the anchor say her name. Dr. Maya Thompson. The syllables carried weight, even to those who didn't know her. On the screen, news footage looped through fragments of chaos. Flight attendants being escorted out by uniformed officers, an airport CEO refusing to comment, flashes of hair scattered on an airplane aisle floor. Reporters shouted questions that went unanswered. Behind them, the early morning sky hung heavy, the color of wet steel. Inside a control room miles away, a younger agent adjusted his headset, whispering to his supervisor, "Sir, was this the same Thompson who built the Vega protocol?" The older man beside him gave a slow nod, eyes still fixed on the feed. "Yes, that's her." His voice carried both disbelief and quiet awe. "And if the code she designed was triggered tonight, we're looking at a full federal freeze across their systems." The camera returned to the airport tarmac, where lights blinked along the wings of planes that would not fly this morning. A crowd had gathered behind the barriers. Passengers stranded, reporters wide-eyed, employees whispering about what had happened mid-flight. Nobody knew all the details yet. They only knew that something had gone terribly wrong somewhere above the clouds. In a dim briefing room, the FAA director flipped through preliminary reports. The first page bore a simple line typed in bold. Incident origin, Flight 227, Houston to Seattle. Time, 11:42 p.m. He exhaled through his nose, rubbed his temples, and said to no one in particular, 30,000 feet. That's where it started. He pressed a button on the remote, and grainy video played, a shaky recording from inside the plane before landing. Laughter, voices, a woman's calm tone beneath the noise. "You should finish what you started," she said. The clip froze on her face, composed and unbroken, eyes reflecting cabin light like glass. Around her, 3 uniformed attendants were caught mid-motion, scissors gleaming faintly in one of their hands. The director sat back slowly. "My God," he whispered. She didn't even flinch. Elsewhere, in a downtown newsroom, journalists scrambled to piece together the sequence of events. Some called it a hate crime, others a federal security breach. One young reporter hesitated before typing his headline. He replayed the video again, the laughter, the silence, the stillness that followed. Then he wrote, "They tried to humiliate her at 30,000 feet." By dawn, her image filled every morning broadcast in America. Some viewers saw defiance in her eyes. Others saw quiet sorrow. To the older generation watching from their kitchens, she reminded them of marches they'd seen decades ago, of women who stood straight while the world tried to break them. In a small apartment across town, Maya herself sat by the window, untouched by the noise outside. Her phone buzzed nonstop, journalists begging for comment, colleagues sending messages of support. She ignored them all. Outside, police lights still pulsed against the curtains. She sipped cold tea and stared at the horizon just beginning to pale with morning. A younger colleague from the Department of Transportation arrived, knocking softly before entering. "Ma'am," he said, voice low, "the suspension order's been confirmed. Every Silverwing flight is grounded. They're calling it unprecedented." Maya nodded, her gaze still distant. No, she murmured. It's not unprecedented. It's overdue. The man hesitated. They're saying you invoked your own protocol. The Vega system went active mid-flight. Is that true? She looked at him for the first time, eyes calm, almost kind. That system was built for moments when dignity is endangered at high altitude. Tonight was one of them. He swallowed, unsure whether to feel pride or fear. You realize this will change everything, he said quietly. Maya turned back to the window. The first light of morning stretched across the skyline like the slow lifting of a curtain. It already has, she said. Outside, the television trucks rolled away, leaving empty coffee cups and fading headlines in their wake. The story would grow bigger by the hour. But for now, in the fragile stillness of early morning, only one truth hung in the air. Somewhere between heaven and earth, a woman had been mocked, and the world had finally stopped to listen. The janitor from earlier would tell his coworkers later that day, "You see that lady on the news? The one with the short hair and steady eyes? She didn't raise her voice, didn't curse, didn't cry. She just stood there, and the whole sky went quiet." No one argued with him, because sometimes, even in a world full of noise, silence has the last word. The Houston terminal hummed with that late evening rhythm only airports have, the drag of rolling suitcases, the hiss of coffee machines, the scattered chatter of weary travelers. Overhead speakers crackled out another delay announcement that nobody really heard. Dr. Maya Thompson adjusted the strap of her leather briefcase and moved toward the first-class line. She looked every inch the professional traveler. Pressed cream blazer, small gold earrings, a quiet poise that came from years of knowing exactly who she was. Her natural curls framed her face neatly, shining under the terminal lights like black silk. The gate agent glanced up from the computer, eyes flicking from Maya's skin tone to her boarding pass. There was that tiny pause, half a second too long to ignore. "Good evening, ma'am," the woman said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You're with Silverwing?" "Yes," Maya replied, her voice calm. "Flight 227 to Seattle." She placed her passport and ID on the counter, her company name visible on the tag, Thompson Aerospace Analytics. "Oh, I see." The agent's tone softened into something politely puzzled. "You're in seat 2A. That's first class, just confirming." "I'm aware," Maya said, reclaiming her documents. The woman blinked, murmured something about boarding soon, and turned to the next passenger. It was a small thing, but small things build walls brick by brick. A few feet away, a man in a gray suit leaned toward his wife and whispered, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "Didn't know they let folks like her up front now." The woman giggled behind her hand. Maya didn't turn her head, didn't let them have the satisfaction of a reaction. She simply straightened her posture and looked down the jetway as the boarding call echoed overhead. Inside the aircraft, warm cabin lighting glowed over polished surfaces and the soft scent of citrus cleaner. The crew was preparing for departure. Alyssa Green, the lead flight attendant, moved briskly through first class checking seat belts and overhead bins. 15 years in the air had etched permanent confidence into her stride. She noticed Maya right away. How could she not? There was something about the woman's composure that drew attention, though it wasn't the kind Alyssa liked. "Evening, ma'am," Alyssa said as Maya settled into her seat. Her eyes lingered on the curls. "If you need anything, well, anything appropriate for first class, just let us know." Maya looked up, offering a polite smile. "I'm sure I'll manage." Behind Alyssa, two younger attendants laughed softly about a trending dance video. Chad Riker, tall and broad-shouldered, carried a phone mounted on a small stabilizer. "Alyssa, I'm telling you, we should film one of those flight crew challenges. People eat that stuff up," he said. "Maybe something fun before takeoff. Lighten the mood." "Not tonight," she replied. But he was already scrolling through his followers' comments. The third attendant, Jenny Moore, barely 23 and still bright with new hire optimism, leaned closer. "I think it'd be fun," she whispered. "Something quick. We could even get a passenger to join, someone stylish." Alyssa's eyes drifted back to Maya. "We'll see." Maya opened her laptop, her screen filled with diagrams of satellite-assisted navigation grids. A headline from her inbox scrolled past. "Federal Air Safety Contract Renewal, confirmed." She closed it quickly. The work could wait. The quiet couldn't. Passengers trickled in. A businessman across the aisle struggled to wedge an oversized bag into the bin, muttering about how they ought to have stricter rules for carry-ons. When he noticed Maya watching, he smiled without warmth. "Guess we can't all travel light, huh?" "Guess not," she answered softly. Alyssa moved down the aisle again. "Sir, I'll stow that for you." "Ma'am," she added, turning to Maya, "can I get you anything to drink? Perhaps some champagne before departure?" "Water will do." As Alyssa poured it, Chad hovered nearby, his phone quietly recording for his vlog. "Documenting life in the skies," he said cheerfully to Jenny. "People love behind-the-scenes stuff." Then, under his breath, "Bet the comments section would go wild for this one." Jenny frowned. "For what?" He nodded toward Maya. "Corporate type. Fancy watch, hair like she don't care. Could do a first-class makeover bit, show how we polish passengers into proper silver wing style." Jenny looked horrified. "That's not funny, Chad." "Relax," he said, grinning. "It's just a joke." Maya heard them, of course. Years in government briefings had trained her to catch every tone that carried disrespect beneath a smile. She glanced at them briefly, one of those quiet looks that lands heavier than any argument, and went back to her tablet. Alyssa returned to her jump seat, buckling in for takeoff. "I swear, some people think the dress code doesn't apply above ground," she muttered. Chad smirked. "Hey, we could always help them out mid-flight. Snip, snip, problem solved." Jenny laughed nervously. "You're terrible." As the plane taxied, Maya closed her eyes. The low rumble beneath her feet reminded her of childhood car rides, her mother driving through summer storms in Louisiana, saying, "Hold your head high, baby." Even the rain can't drown pride. She smiled faintly at the memory, unaware that the night ahead would test those words harder than anything before. Once they reached cruising altitude, Alyssa began the service routine. She stopped by Maya's seat again, still carrying that faint edge of condescension. "How's everything, doctor? What was the name again?" "Thompson," Maya replied. "Everything's fine." "Of course," Alyssa said, tilting her head as if examining something just slightly out of place. "You know, we usually encourage a polished look for our premium cabin. Helps maintain a certain atmosphere." Maya's lips curved, not in humor, but in patience. "My appearance isn't disturbing your atmosphere, is it?" Alyssa blinked, realizing she'd pushed too far. "Of course not. Just friendly advice." Chad appeared again, pretending to tidy a nearby seat while adjusting his phone angle. "Man, the comments would eat this up," he whispered, more to himself than anyone. Jenny whispered sharply, "Stop filming, Chad." The cabin lights dimmed for the dinner service, but the air felt heavier now, charged with something unspoken. Passengers scrolled through their phones, oblivious to the small theater of prejudice unfolding 2 rows ahead. When dessert service ended, Alyssa returned with a brush from the amenities kit, twirling it between her fingers. "You ever tried one of these smoothing tools?" she asked with a practiced smile. Maya looked at her for a long moment. "No, I don't smooth what isn't broken." Alyssa's grin faltered. Chad snickered quietly. Jenny dropped her tray napkin, her hands trembling. Somewhere over Kansas, turbulence began to rumble through the cabin. The captain's voice came over the speaker. "Seatbelts fastened, folks. Bit of a rough patch ahead." The lights flickered once, then steadied. Chad put his phone away for a moment, finally uneasy. Alyssa adjusted her scarf, forcing cheer. "Just weather, everyone. Nothing unusual." Maya sat back, eyes fixed on the window where lightning danced faintly among clouds. In her reflection, she saw calm, not weakness, but control. She knew storms, both the kind outside and the ones that wore human faces. Behind her, a whisper traveled between crew members. "She's a handful. Let her be. We'll deal with her later." Outside, thunder rolled again, low and distant, as if the sky itself were clearing its throat. And within that sealed cabin of polite cruelty and recycled air, something invisible began to shift, the quiet gathering of consequence, waiting patiently for its cue. The turbulence eased, leaving a strange hollow quiet hanging in the cabin. Seatbelt signs blinked off and conversation slowly returned. Low murmurs, the clink of ice in glasses, the hum of the engine steady again. Maya reopened her laptop, more to distract herself than to work. Numbers scrolled across the screen, a draft proposal for the Federal Flight Data Ethics Program. She wasn't supposed to check it until Monday, but tonight her thoughts wouldn't rest. Across the aisle, Chad balanced his phone on a service tray, scrolling through his followers' comments. You should see this, Alyssa, he whispered, grinning. That little clip I uploaded? Already getting traction. People love when we show the real side of passengers. Alyssa leaned over his shoulder. You film during boarding? You know company policy. Relax, he said. It's just background stuff. Faces blurred. People like authenticity. Jenny shifted uncomfortably beside them. You shouldn't be posting while we're in flight, she said softly. It's against FAA regulation. Chad rolled his eyes. You're adorable, rookie. It's harmless. Alyssa smirked, though her eyes stayed on Maya. The scientist sat motionless, one hand resting on her closed laptop, her expression unreadable. She's confident, isn't she? Alyssa said quietly. That kind of confidence always hides something. Jenny frowned. Maybe it's just confidence. Don't be naive, Alyssa murmured. You spend long enough in the air, you can spot the difficult ones before they even speak. Maya reached for her glass of water and caught their reflection in the dark window, three figures whispering, glancing her way, laughing under their breath. She'd seen that pattern before. The little circle of judgment, the comfort people find in their own cruelty. When Chad stood up with his phone again, Jenny's stomach tightened. Don't, she whispered. Just one shot, he said. Alyssa, pretend you're giving a makeover demo. You know, like those spa ads? Quick joke, harmless. Alyssa laughed lightly. I'm not touching a passenger. Then just mime it, Chad urged. Like how to keep our cabin looking classy. It's satire. They were whispering, but sound travels strangely in an aircraft cabin. Maya heard every word. She turned slowly, her gaze meeting Chad's through the faint glow of the aisle light. If you point that camera at me, she said evenly, you'll regret it. The tone wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was steady enough to still the air around them. Chad blinked, surprised. Whoa, ma'am, it's just a joke. Most cruelty is, she replied. Alyssa's smile froze. The older woman's calm unsettled her. Dr. Thompson, he didn't mean any harm. Maya closed her laptop and set it on her lap. Intent isn't the issue. Behavior is. Chad muttered. Guess someone doesn't have a sense of humor. Guess someone doesn't have sense? Maya said quietly. A snicker came from a man 2 rows behind, emboldened by the tension. Someone's too sensitive. Jenny whispered. Please, can we not? But the energy had already shifted. The air felt sharp now, charged with something meaner than before. Alyssa tried to recover, speaking in that false, cheerful tone practiced for unruly passengers. Let's all stay calm. We want everyone comfortable. She turned back to Maya, her voice sugar-coated. Would you like me to help tidy your hair, ma'am? Sometimes the static? Don't touch me, Maya said. Her voice was soft, but Alyssa drew back as if struck. The surrounding passengers pretended to scroll their phones, pretending not to watch. Chad smirked, whispering something about attitude. Jenny stared down at her hands, guilt crawling up her neck. 5 minutes passed in silence before Chad broke it again, holding up his phone. Okay, fine. No videos. But come on, Alyssa. Tell me she doesn't look like she just came from a science fair. Alyssa giggled before she could stop herself. It wasn't even funny, but cruelty feeds on company. Maya's hand tightened around her glass. She thought of her mother again, the way she'd said, don't ever let them teach you shame for being seen. The words steadied her breath. She looked at Chad and said, what do you actually do for a living, besides mocking strangers? I keep the cabin safe, he shot back. Then, maybe start by policing yourself, she said. The chuckles from the nearby row stopped. For the first time, Chad seemed unsure. Alyssa turned toward the galley, cheeks flushed, muttering, I'll check the service list. Jenny followed, whispering urgently, can we please stop this before it gets worse? Alyssa sighed. Rookie, you don't last long up here if you let people walk over you. That woman's testing boundaries. Jenny shook her head. I don't think that's what's happening. When they returned to the aisle, Chad's phone chimed again. The screen lit with comments, laughing emojis, hearts, one-line reading. She looks like she owns the plane, lol. He grinned. People love it. Alyssa leaned in. Delete it. Relax. Nobody knows who she is. Jenny swallowed. What if she's someone important? She's someone with an ego, Alyssa said, brushing her sleeve, and hair that could use discipline. Maya heard the words clearly this time. She exhaled slowly through her nose, eyes still on the clouds. Discipline, she repeated under her breath. The taste of that word was bitter, familiar. The intercom chimed softly, Captain's voice again. Folks, we're cruising smooth at 32,000. Expect a clear route to Seattle. Chad stretched, bored. Well, guess we'll need something to pass the time. He picked up a pair of cabin scissors used for packaging, twirling them between his fingers. We could do a little in-flight salon, show folks how we keep the silver wing image. Jenny grabbed his wrist. That's not funny. He laughed, pulling free. Relax. Just posing. He snapped a photo of himself holding the scissors like a prop. Alyssa rolled her eyes. Put those away. But Chad didn't. He turned toward Maya's seat, still smirking. You sure you don't want a trim, Doc, for the vlog? You'd go viral. This time, several passengers laughed. Small, cruel laughs. Maya didn't move. Her voice, when it came, was low and clear. You're already viral, she said. You just don't know what kind of infection it is yet. Jenny froze. Alyssa frowned, unsure how to respond. Chad's grin faltered for the first time. The plane's cabin lights flickered again, a brief tremor through the engines. Maya closed her eyes, letting the vibration hum through her bones. The moment passed. The laughter died out. Alyssa busied herself serving coffee down the aisle. Chad tucked his phone away, muttering about humorless passengers. Jenny stayed by the galley door, looking back at Maya, guilt etched across her face. Somewhere deep inside the fuselage, a faint electronic chime sounded, a system notification no one noticed. Maya opened her eyes and very quietly reached for her laptop again. She typed one line, invisible to everyone else. Vega diagnostic, monitoring initiated. Then she closed it, folded her hands, and waited. The storm outside had passed, but the air inside the cabin was darker now. Every small sound, clinking glasses, shifting feet, felt sharper, edged. Jenny couldn't shake the feeling that something irreversible had just begun. Maya sat still, her reflection faint in the window, and thought about how silence sometimes protects you longer than anger ever could. The hum of the engines filled the cabin again, steady and constant like the beating of a clock. Dinner trays had been cleared, the lights dimmed to a low amber glow, and most passengers were dozing or pretending to. But tension still lived in the aisle, invisible yet heavy, like static before a storm. Chad leaned against the galley counter, spinning the small pair of cabin scissors in his hand, twirling them as if they were harmless toys. Alyssa was beside him, checking the manifest, her voice sharp with irritation. Put that down before you hurt yourself, she muttered, or someone else. Chad grinned. It's just for the vlog, relax. I'll make it a skit. In-flight stylist saves the day. He winked, his teeth catching the dim light. Our viewers will love it. Everyone thinks flight attendants are boring. Jenny, leaning against the service door, shook her head. This isn't funny, Chad. She's a passenger. You can't just... Come on, he interrupted. She told me to finish what I started. Didn't you hear? She practically asked for it. Alyssa sighed, tired of playing referee. Fine, one quick bit, but keep it playful. No contact, no faces. She didn't believe he'd actually do it. In 15 years, she'd seen all kinds of poor judgment on flights, sarcasm, flirtation, passengers shouting, but not this, not cruelty dressed as humor. Chad stepped back into the aisle, phone raised, camera blinking red. He whispered into the mic, Silver Wing's first-class salon is now open, folks. We keep our passengers looking professional. His voice dripped with sarcasm. Jenny followed, whispering, Chad, stop! But he was already moving toward Maya's seat. Maya had her eyes closed, resting, her laptop folded neatly on the tray. She felt the shift in the air before she heard it, the slight intake of breath from nearby passengers, the low chuckle from behind, the sound of scissors opening. That tiny metallic click was unmistakable. She opened her eyes just as Chad's shadow fell over her. Evening, Doc, he said softly, pretending cheer. Mind if we give your curls a little tune-up? Company standards, you know. Before she could speak, a lock of her hair brushed against the blades, and a single curl fell onto her shoulder. A few passengers gasped quietly. Most just stared. Alyssa stood frozen halfway down the aisle, her mouth slightly open. Chad! Jenny hissed, grabbing his arm. That's enough! He pulled back, laughing nervously. It's a joke. Relax, I didn't mean. Maya lifted her hand slowly, brushing the fallen curl from her shoulder. Her movements were precise, deliberate. You should finish what you started, she said, voice calm, almost gentle. The laughter faltered. Her tone carried no anger, no threat, just certainty, like a judge pronouncing a sentence that had already been decided. Chad blinked, confused. Hey, I said I'm sorry. It's just, Alyssa finally found her voice. Both of you back to the galley. Now. But the damage was done. Phones were already up. One man in a business suit recorded from the aisle, whispering commentary to his camera. You seeing this? First-class drama on Silverwing. Another passenger laughed quietly, saying, Guess the internet's about to get new content. Jenny covered her face with her hands. This isn't happening, she whispered. Maya sat motionless, her gaze fixed on the window. Outside, the moonlight washed the clouds in silver. She didn't move, didn't shout, didn't demand anything. That silence unsettled people more than rage ever could. Chad backed away, mumbling excuses. It was a misunderstanding. She's overreacting. Alyssa turned on him, whispering harshly. You filmed it, didn't you? He hesitated. Maybe, but it's not. Delete it. I can't. It's on live. Alyssa's stomach dropped. You went live? Are you insane? Jenny gasped, tears welling in her eyes. Turn it off. Turn it off now. But it was too late. The Wi-Fi light blinked green on his device. Somewhere miles below them, the first viewers were already watching, laughing, commenting, sharing. Sky Salon. Maya heard the faint ping of a notification on her own phone, a name flashing across the screen. Federal Liaison, urgent. She ignored it. The situation was still unfolding, and she knew how these moments worked. People reveal themselves when they believe they hold power. Chad finally slumped into the jump seat, pale now, muttering, It's just a clip. It's nothing. Jenny knelt beside Maya's seat, voice trembling. Ma'am, I'm so sorry. I tried to stop him. I swear I did. Maya looked at her and for the first time that night smiled faintly. I believe you. Jenny swallowed hard. Please don't report this. He didn't mean to. Meaning is irrelevant, Maya said softly. What matters is consequence. The captain's voice broke through the intercom. Crew, prepare for descent. Landing in approximately 20 minutes. The words carried a weight no one else heard. Maya closed her eyes again. Descent, she thought. Yes, time for that. As the plane began its slow drop through the atmosphere, the cabin lights brightened. Alyssa walked the aisle mechanically, pretending everything was normal. Passengers exchanged glances, some sympathetic, others curious. No one spoke to Maya. Silence, again, became her armor. When the landing gear dropped, Jenny's hands were shaking too much to stow the final trays. Alyssa whispered, Compose yourself. Last thing we need is a scene. It's already a scene, Jenny said under her breath. At touchdown, the brakes screeched, and every head jolted forward. When the seatbelt sign dinged off, phones came alive. Notifications pinged. A few passengers were already whispering about the live feed, scrolling through comments. It's trending, someone said. She's on camera. The scientist lady. Alyssa turned sharply. What did you say? Sky Salon, the man replied, smirking. 500,000 views already. Maya unbuckled her seatbelt slowly. You should check your flight logs, she murmured to no one in particular. Then she stood adjusting her blazer and picked up her briefcase. Chad's phone buzzed violently in his hand. The live stream froze. The screen turned black, replaced by red letters. Federal access override. Do not delete evidence. He stared, eyes wide. What the hell? Alyssa's tablet did the same. The overhead intercom crackled, a voice none of them recognized echoing through the cabin. All Silverwing operations are temporarily suspended pending federal review. Gasps rippled through the rows. Jenny clapped a hand to her mouth. Chad dropped his phone, its screen still glowing with that message. Alyssa looked to Maya, who stood calmly in the aisle, her expression unreadable. What did you do? Alyssa whispered. Maya met her eyes. I told you to finish what you started, she said softly. Now the system will. Outside, blue lights flooded the runway. Airport security vehicles closed in around the plane like shadows converging. From the cockpit came the captain's stunned voice. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We're experiencing an unscheduled inspection. Maya sat back down, folding her hands neatly in her lap as uniformed officers approached the door. Passengers murmured, fear replacing curiosity. Jenny leaned close, whispering, Ma'am, who are you? Maya didn't answer. She didn't need to. The hum of the engines faded, replaced by the rhythmic sound of boots on the jet bridge. Somewhere far above them, the system she'd built was already awake, cold, precise, and incorruptible. In the final quiet moment before the door opened, she looked at the reflection in the window, her own face, calm beneath the cabin's fading light, framed by one uneven curl. Then she whispered, almost to herself, Dignity always lands. The plane door opened to a flood of blue light, and the low murmur of radios. Passengers craned their necks to see what was happening. Uniformed airport officers stood in formation outside the jet bridge, waiting, not rushing, just waiting, as if they already knew who they had come for. Alyssa's hands trembled as she tried to put on a smile for the passengers, saying something about routine checks. Nobody believed her. The air smelled of fear and metal. Maya remained seated, calm, her briefcase on her lap. Jenny sat 2 rows back, watching her, torn between relief that someone was finally in control and terror over what that control might mean. Chad was pale, his phone dead and lifeless in his hands, its screen still flashing access restricted. He had pressed every button, tried to reboot it, but each attempt ended with the same red warning: Federal Evidence Preservation Active. A senior security officer stepped aboard. His uniform bore no airline logo, only a silver badge engraved with the crest of the Department of Transportation. He didn't ask permission. He simply walked to where Maya sat and nodded respectfully. "Dr. Thompson," he said, low enough that only those nearby could hear, "we've secured the feed. You're safe to debrief when ready." A ripple of confusion passed through the crew. Alyssa's eyes widened. "Doctor who?" she asked, her voice cracking. The officer ignored her, gesturing to 2 agents to begin collecting electronic devices. "What is this?" Chad barked. "You can't just take my phone." The officer turned his head slightly, the way someone does when they've dealt with too many loud people in their life. "Sir, your device contains live evidence of a federal incident under review. It will be returned upon completion of the investigation." Alyssa stepped forward, trying to reclaim authority she no longer had. "Excuse me, this is our aircraft. I'm the lead." The officer cut her off. "Not anymore." He handed her a printed order. "Effective immediately, Silver Wing Flight 227 is under federal jurisdiction." She stared at the paper. Her face drained of color. The letterhead read, "Federal Aviation Oversight, Code Vega Activation." Beneath it, her own name was listed under subjected personnel. Maya rose from her seat, gathering her things slowly. Her composure made her presence larger somehow, like gravity itself had shifted toward her. "You'll want to check the crew manifest," she said. There were 3 attendants involved. Jenny stood abruptly. "Ma'am," Maya's gaze softened when it fell on her. "You tried to stop them. That's noted." Jenny sat down again, trembling. Chad looked from one face to another. "Wait, what's going on? Who are you?" Maya looked at him for a long moment before answering. "I'm the person you streamed to the world," she said. "And the person who built the federal monitoring system that's now auditing every word you said." The words landed heavy in the stale cabin air. Alyssa took a step back as if distance could undo what she'd just heard. "You're what? You're federal?" "I'm a lead architect for the Flight Data Ethics Program," Maya said, "the one designed to detect racial and behavioral misconduct in aviation services." She glanced toward the still glowing cockpit door. "Tonight, that system did exactly what it was meant to do." The officer gestured toward the aisle. "Dr. Thompson, we have a secured briefing room prepared." "Thank you," she replied. Then she turned to Alyssa, Chad, and Jenny. Her tone was not cruel, it was clinical, almost weary. "You'll be questioned separately. Tell the truth. Every second of this flight is already recorded." Alyssa tried to speak, but her throat betrayed her. "We didn't mean to." "I know," Maya interrupted gently. "You meant to laugh." She walked down the aisle, her heels tapping softly against the floor. Passengers watched in silence as she passed. Some lowered their eyes, others whispered apologies she didn't need. A child near the back whispered to his mother, "Is she a cop?" The woman shook her head slowly. "No, sweetheart, she's something bigger." When Maya reached the jet bridge, she stopped and looked back one last time. The plane behind her looked like a stage after the curtain had dropped. Bright lights, frozen faces, and the echo of something ugly that had finally run out of room to hide. In the terminal, a line of officials and federal agents waited. Reporters had begun to gather beyond the glass, flashes from their cameras bouncing off the windows. One of the agents leaned toward his superior. "It's trending nationwide. That live stream hit 2 million views before it froze." Maya didn't react. She simply handed over her briefcase. "All relevant data is synchronized with the Vega network," she said. "Chain of custody begins now." The lead agent nodded. "Understood, ma'am. Do you want a statement issued?" "Not yet," she said. "Let them wonder." Inside the secured office, the atmosphere shifted from chaos to focus. Screens displayed real-time analytics from the flight, every camera angle, every audio feed, even biometric readings from the crew. A technician turned in his chair. Dr. Thompson, your system performed perfectly, triggered within 40 seconds of threshold violation. Maya didn't smile. That means it worked, but it also means it was necessary. The technician hesitated. Would you like us to proceed with full corporate lockdown? Yes, she said quietly. Start the audit. I want every employee record, every prior complaint, every dismissed case pulled. Tonight isn't about one flight, it's about a pattern. Back on the tarmac, Alyssa and Chad were led away for questioning. Jenny followed, tears streaming down her face, whispering prayers into her shaking hands. Passengers were being escorted off the plane, their phones disabled, their footage encrypted under federal seal. From the observation window, Maya watched them. The weight of what had happened pressed against her chest, not as pride, but as exhaustion. She hadn't wanted to humiliate anyone. She'd wanted to protect people like herself, people who never got the chance to speak before being judged. An aide entered the room. Dr. Thompson, the secretary's office is requesting an immediate call. They've confirmed temporary suspension of all Silverwing operations pending investigation. Good, she said, but her tone was soft, almost mournful. This isn't about punishment. It's about proof. The aide looked puzzled. Proof of what? That dignity, she said, turning back to the glass, isn't negotiable at altitude. Outside, the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the runway in muted gold. Ground crews stood still, unsure whether to work or wait. Inside the plane, an officer sealed the cabin door with a federal tag, bright red against the silver metal. Jenny, walking past under escort, glanced toward Maya's silhouette through the office window. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met. Maya offered the faintest nod, a silent promise that the truth would matter this time. When the jet bridge emptied and the last echo of chaos faded, the only sound left was the steady beep of servers capturing every byte of data from the flight. The system was awake now, and so was the world. Maya sat down at the briefing table, hands folded, posture straight. Someone handed her a cup of coffee, and she stared into the dark surface of it for a long while before whispering, "We built the sky to carry people safely, not to carry their hate." No one spoke after that. The agents continued their work, typing quietly, their screens reflecting her face, a woman who had just turned humiliation into evidence and silence into law. By morning, the story had broken wide open. Screens in airport lounges glowed with the same headline across every network: Silverwing Airlines under federal suspension for dignity violations. Travelers stopped mid-stride to stare, coffee cups pausing halfway to their lips. No one understood exactly what dignity violations meant, but the image of Dr. Maya Thompson stepping off that plane, calm, composed, hair uneven yet proud, was enough to start the fire. Inside Silverwing's corporate headquarters, the boardroom lights were harsh and cold. The CEO, Victor Allen, slammed a folder onto the table. "Someone tell me what in God's name happened up there," he barked. His voice echoed off the glass walls. Lawyers, PR officers, and department heads sat stiffly, afraid to meet his eyes. A young communications director stammered, "Sir, it appears there was a live stream from one of our crew members. It went viral overnight, over 3 million views before federal override shut it down." Allen leaned forward. "And the passenger?" "Dr. Maya Thompson," said the legal counsel. "Federal contractor, Department of Transportation, high-level clearance." The CEO went pale. "A federal contractor on our plane?" "Yes, sir," the counsel continued. "She's the lead architect of the Flight Data Ethics Program." The room fell silent. Someone whispered, "The Vega system." Allen rubbed his face. "The same system that monitors us?" "Exactly. And she triggered it mid-flight." He sank into his chair, his jaw tightening. Jesus. Meanwhile, at the Federal Operations Center downtown, the Vega servers hummed under cool blue light. Analysts worked quietly, combing through data every second of the flight, every voice recorded, every biometric fluctuation. On one monitor, a graph spiked red the moment the scissors cut through Maya's hair. Another showed facial recognition logs, attendants laughing, passengers filming, the moment dignity thresholds crossed the federal line. An investigator turned to his colleague. "It's airtight." The algorithm logged multiple violations: mockery, assault, hate indicators. She didn't have to say a word. The system saw everything. At 10:42 a.m., a message went out from Washington. Immediate suspension of Silverwing Airlines operations pending investigation. All flights grounded. Within minutes, airports from New York to LA reported halted boarding calls. Angry travelers filled terminals demanding answers, but the overhead screens showed the same red banner everywhere. Federal review in progress. In Houston, where Flight 227 had departed, Jenny Moore sat in a small interview room with a federal agent. Her hands shook as she signed the statement. "I tried to stop him," she whispered. "I told them it wasn't right." The agent nodded. "You did the right thing, Miss Moore. The system corroborated your account." She looked up, tears pooling. "Is she okay, Dr. Thompson?" "She's fine," the agent said gently. "She's leading the review." Jenny exhaled, a sob slipping through her composure. "We didn't know who she was." "That's the point," the agent said. "You shouldn't have to know someone's title to treat them with respect." Across town, Maya sat in a pressurized conference room lined with screens showing real-time social media feeds. Her phone vibrated nonstop, requests for interviews, apologies, pleas for leniency. She ignored them all. She was focused on one feed, the public reaction. Thousands of messages flooded in from women across the country, many with natural curls like hers, sharing stories of humiliation in workplaces, airports, and classrooms. Some posted pictures of their hair, captioned "Flying Free." A federal liaison entered, holding a file. "Dr. Thompson, the secretary is requesting a statement. They want you to address the nation this evening." Maya looked up from the screen. The nation doesn't need another speech. They need accountability. The airline's begging for negotiation. They say they'll issue a public apology if we ease the suspension. Maya shook her head. They don't understand. This isn't just about them. It's about every company that thinks dignity is optional at 30,000 feet. The liaison hesitated. "You know this will cost jobs, pilots, staff, crews." Her voice softened. So does silence. By noon, the Silverwing headquarters had become a fortress of reporters. Victor Allen stood at the window, watching the chaos below. He turned to his chief of operations, pale and sweating. "We need to contact her. Offer a settlement, anything." "Sir, she's not answering calls." "Then get someone who can make her listen." In a quiet hotel room near the airport, Maya's assistant, Sarah, sat across from her, scrolling through updates. "They're panicking," she said. "The stock dropped 15% in 2 hours." Maya sipped her tea, unhurried. "Panic's good. It means they finally feel something." Sarah hesitated. "They're saying the live stream cut off right before you activated the Vega protocol. People are making up stories, calling you an agent, a spy, even a witch." Maya smiled faintly. "Let them. People fear what exposes them." Outside, the sky was clear, deceptively calm. A fleet of grounded planes sat motionless on the tarmac, their silver bodies gleaming in the sun like beached whales. News choppers circled overhead. In a break room somewhere, 2 Silverwing attendants watched the coverage in silence. One of them, an older black woman, whispered, "Took something like this to finally make them see." The younger attendant nodded slowly. "Maybe the sky ain't so friendly after all." At 3 p.m., a federal briefing took place. Cameras flashed, reporters jostled. The spokesperson read from a prepared statement. "The Department of Transportation has confirmed the activation of the Vega protocol aboard Silverwing Flight 227. Evidence collected demonstrates multiple instances of racially motivated misconduct by airline personnel. Effective immediately, Silverwing Airlines is suspended from all federal contracts and flight operations pending full review." The crowd erupted in questions, but the spokesperson raised a hand. "Dr. Maya Thompson will lead the investigation into systemic bias within the airline industry. Further comment will be issued after initial findings." That night, as dusk spread over the city, Maya stood alone on the observation deck outside the federal complex. The runways were still empty, except for flashing maintenance lights. She remembered her mother again, how she used to sit by the window during storms, whispering, "Let the sky teach them patience." Sarah approached quietly, holding a tablet. "The secretary wants to know what message you want to send tomorrow." Maya didn't turn around. "I'll tell them the truth," she said. "That justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it lands quietly and waits for the world to listen." Down below, the blinking lights of the grounded planes stretched for miles, red and white dots against the darkness. Each one carried a story of arrogance, indifference, apology waiting too late. And above them all, for the first time in years, the sky itself seemed to hold its breath, as if honoring the woman who had reminded it what dignity really looked like. The interrogation room at the Houston field office was too bright, too cold. Fluorescent light hummed faintly above, washing every face in the same pale, nervous color. Alyssa Green sat rigid at the steel table, her airline uniform wrinkled and stained from a sleepless night. Across from her, a federal investigator in a dark suit flipped through a tablet, his voice calm but sharp. "You understand this interview is recorded, correct?" he asked. Alyssa nodded. "Yes, sir." He slid the tablet toward her. On the screen was a still frame from the flight surveillance feed, her standing over Maya's seat, scissors glinting in her hand. Behind her, Chad's grin, the passengers' phones, frozen evidence. "Tell me what was happening in this moment," the agent said. Alyssa's throat constricted. It was supposed to be a joke. I told him to stop." "You're the lead attendant. You had authority. Why didn't you?" Her eyes darted away from the screen. "I didn't think it would go that far. I didn't know who she was." The agent leaned back. "So if she hadn't been a federal contractor, would that have made it acceptable?" Alyssa's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The question hung there, heavy and merciless. Down the hall, in another room, Chad sat slouched in his chair, face pale under the harsh light. "This is ridiculous," he said, running a hand through his hair. "It was a prank. She overreacted." The investigator across from him didn't look up from his notes. "She overreacted to being restrained and having her hair cut?" Chad shifted uncomfortably. "Nobody restrained her. We just—" He trailed off as the agent played the video. The sound filled the room. Laughter, mockery, the unmistakable snip of scissors. "Still want to finish that sentence?" the agent asked. Chad swallowed hard. "We didn't mean harm." The agent paused the video on Maya's face, serene, unflinching amid chaos. "No," he said quietly, "you meant entertainment." Meanwhile, Jenny Moore sat in a separate office with Dr. Thompson herself. It wasn't an interrogation. It was something quieter, more human. Jenny looked exhausted, her eyes rimmed red. "I didn't stop them," she said softly. "I wanted to, but I froze." Maya's voice was gentle but firm. "Freezing isn't the same as approving, Jenny. Fear can paralyze good people. But what matters is what you do afterward." Jenny's lip trembled. "I'm cooperating. I'll testify, whatever you need." Maya nodded slowly. "That's enough." Jenny hesitated. "They don't understand who you are." "They don't need to," Maya replied. "They just need to understand what they did." Outside, the press waited like vultures at the gates. Every outlet wanted a glimpse of the woman behind the Vega activation. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but Maya ignored them all as she exited the building under escort. Her calm in the face of frenzy only deepened the mystery. Back inside, the airline's legal team arrived, trying to stem the bleeding. Victor Allen, the CEO, paced the corridor outside the briefing room, flanked by two corporate attorneys. "How bad is it?" he demanded. "Worse than we thought," one lawyer said. "The federal data logs show dozens of prior complaints about racial misconduct, ignored or buried." Allen's face hardened. "And she has access to those?" "Every file, every timestamp. She built the system." He slammed his fist against the wall. "God Almighty." When he entered the conference room, Maya was already there, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Allen," she said, standing, "I assume you're here to cooperate." Allen tried to smile, but it faltered. "Dr. Thompson, this has gotten out of control. We regret what happened. Our staff, well, they exercised poor judgment, but surely suspension of the entire airline." "Poor judgment?" Maya interrupted quietly. "Is that what you call a public assault?" He exhaled sharply, spreading his hands. "Look, let's be reasonable. No one was seriously injured. We'll issue a full apology. Donate to." Maya's gaze silenced him. "You think this is about image management?" she asked. "You don't understand. The problem isn't your staff, it's your culture. Every sneer, every whisper on that flight was a symptom." Allen shifted uneasily. "If you're implying—" "I'm not implying anything," she said. "I'm showing you evidence." She turned her laptop toward him. On the screen, pages of internal Silverwing correspondence scrolled, emails dismissing complaints, mocking passengers, classifying bias reports as customer mood issues. His face drained of color as he read. This This can't all be real, he stammered. It's real, she said. Your employees made sure of that. A federal official entered the room then, carrying a sealed folder. Dr. Thompson, the department requests your recommendation before proceeding with criminal referrals. Allen's voice cracked. Criminal? They'll destroy us. Maya closed her laptop. No, she said softly. You did that yourselves. He sank into a chair, staring blankly at the wall. For the first time, the full gravity of it sank in. An entire company brought to its knees not by competition, not by economy, but by arrogance. Later that night, Maya stood outside the building, breathing the heavy air. The reporters were gone, the streetlights humming low. Jenny approached timidly, clutching a folder. I gave them everything, she said. The messages, the video backups. I didn't want to, but it's right. Maya studied her. That took courage. Jenny nodded. I just kept thinking, if I don't tell the truth, it'll happen again to someone else. Maya smiled faintly. Then you've already changed more than you know. Jenny hesitated, then asked, what happens to them now? Alyssa, Chad? They'll face the same system they thought they could mock, Maya said. Maybe that's justice. Maybe it's mercy. She watched the city lights flicker in the distance, the sound of planes silent above, a rare stillness in a world always moving. For the first time, she felt the weight of quiet victory, though it came with no joy. Justice wasn't supposed to feel like triumph. It was supposed to feel like balance restored. Somewhere inside the building, Victor Allen was still on the phone, begging for leniency that would never come. Alyssa sat in a holding room, whispering to herself that she wasn't a bad person. Chad stared at a blank wall, realizing that silence could sound louder than laughter when it finally turned on you. And Maya, standing beneath the fading glow of a streetlight, thought of the sky again, the endless place she had devoted her life to making safe. Tonight, it felt different. Not smaller, not darker, just quieter, as if even the heavens were listening. The hearing room was colder than it needed to be, the kind of chill that made every voice sound sharper. Rows of cameras lined the back wall, their red lights blinking like watchful eyes. In the center sat a long mahogany table where Dr. Maya Thompson faced the representatives of the Federal Civil Aviation Bureau. Across from her were Silver Wing executives, pale and exhausted, their lawyers whispering frantic instructions under their breath. The air hummed with quiet tension. The chairwoman cleared her throat. Dr. Thompson, thank you for appearing before this board. We're reviewing evidence regarding Flight 227 and the subsequent suspension of Silver Wing Airlines. Please summarize your findings for the record. Maya straightened slightly, her hands folded. The Vega Protocol recorded multiple violations, she said calmly. Assault, verbal harassment, and racial misconduct, all while in federal airspace. What happened aboard that flight wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a culture revealing itself. One of the executives shifted in his seat. With respect, Dr. Thompson, this was an isolated incident. She met his eyes. Is it isolated when 42 prior complaints match the same pattern? Same phrases? Same justifications? The data doesn't lie, Mr. Lawson. It only exposes what people think will stay hidden. The chairwoman gestured toward a technician who dimmed the lights. A large monitor flickered to life. The video began to play, silent but unmistakable. Alyssa leaning over Maya's seat, the quick flash of scissors, the laughter. The camera then cut to the faces of other passengers, some filming, some cheering. Maya's own stillness in that chaos made the room feel heavier. Pause, Maya instructed softly. The screen froze on her face, the same calm that had unsettled so many. This was the moment I activated Vega, she said. Not to punish, but to preserve. The protocol doesn't trigger because of emotion. It triggers because the metrics of cruelty cross a threshold. One board member leaned forward. Metrics of cruelty? Yes, Maya said. Tone, language, body movement, biometric stress from the victim, engagement from bystanders. We designed Vega to quantify what society tries to rationalize. The room was silent for a moment. Even the reporters stopped typing. The chairwoman finally spoke. And what do you recommend as corrective action? Maya's voice stayed even. Comprehensive accountability. Not a fine. Not a workshop. Real change, beginning with leadership. Victor Allen, the CEO, bristled. Dr. Thompson, our company employs over 20,000 people. You're suggesting we dismantle an entire operation over one misjudgment? Over one truth, Maya corrected. A truth you've ignored until it cost you everything. The words struck harder than she intended. Alan's shoulders sagged. He looked suddenly smaller, older. "You've made your point," he said, his tone cracking. "What do you want from us?" Maya regarded him quietly before answering. "I don't want anything from you. I want safety for those who look like me when they fly your planes. That's not revenge. That's repair." The chairwoman nodded to the technician, who turned the lights back on. "Dr. Thompson, the department appreciates your service. The board will deliberate and announce its findings tomorrow." As the session adjourned, reporters rushed forward, microphones flashing. "Dr. Thompson, will Silverwing ever fly again?" "Do you feel vindicated? Was this personal?" She ignored them all, her gaze fixed ahead. In the hallway outside, a young security officer approached, holding a tablet. "Ma'am, the press is calling this the Sky Trial. They're saying you might have just changed aviation law." Maya smiled faintly. "The law was always there," she said. "People just forgot to enforce it." That night, she returned to her apartment overlooking the bay. The city glowed below, calm after the storm. On the table by the window sat a stack of unopened envelopes, letters from strangers, women from all over the country. One from Atlanta read, "They made me cut my braids before a job interview. Thank you for making them see." Another from Chicago simply said, "You made me believe my hair is not a problem to solve." She read a few, then set them aside, overwhelmed. The truth was she hadn't done this to be a symbol. She had just refused to bow her head. Her phone buzzed. It was Jenny. "Dr. Thompson?" The young woman's voice trembled through the line. "They asked me to testify tomorrow. I don't know if I can." "Yes, you can," Maya said softly. "Tell them what you saw. Don't dress it up. Don't shrink it down. The truth's heavy, but it carries itself once you let it speak." Jenny sniffled. "I keep seeing her face, Alyssa. She looked at me like she didn't know who she was anymore." "Maybe she doesn't," Maya said. "That's what guilt does when it finally wakes up." After they hung up, Maya turned back to the window. Across the skyline, the Silverwing logo still glowed faintly atop a skyscraper, its silver wings spread wide against the dark. Tomorrow, that light would likely be turned off. She didn't take pleasure in that thought. She just felt an odd, steady calm. The same kind of quiet after a plane lands through turbulence, when everyone realizes they've survived something they never should have experienced in the first place. The next morning came gray and heavy with rain. Reporters gathered again as the board reconvened. The chairwoman's voice carried through the static of microphones. After reviewing the evidence, this committee concludes that Silverwing Airlines engaged in systemic bias and negligence. The department hereby orders the continuation of the suspension and a full-scale industry audit led by Dr. Maya Thompson. Flashes erupted as Maya stood. Victor Allen bowed his head, defeated. Jenny wept quietly from the gallery. The verdict echoed across news channels within minutes. Outside, the rain turned the airport tarmac into a mirror. Grounded planes reflected back the cloudy sky. Still, heavy, waiting. Maya stepped into the downpour without an umbrella. The cold drops ran through her uneven curls, cleansing more than they stung. For the first time since that night, she let herself breathe. A journalist shouted through the noise, "Dr. Thompson, what happens next?" She paused, water dripping from her hands, her eyes calm and resolute. "Next," she said. "Next, we start flying right." Then she walked away as thunder rolled above, the kind that didn't sound angry anymore. Just final, like the sky closing one chapter and clearing room for another. The morning after the verdict, the world seemed to turn upside down. Every news channel carried the same headline, the same images of stunned executives and grounded planes. Silverwing Airlines federal operations suspended. Anchors spoke in measured tones, but their eyes betrayed the thrill of chaos. For the first time in decades, an entire airline had been brought to a standstill. Not by a crash, not by bankruptcy, but by conscience. At the top of a glass tower in downtown Chicago, Victor Allen watched it unfold from behind a conference table littered with empty coffee cups and trembling hands. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. His team sat around him, their voices hushed and desperate. "We're hemorrhaging millions every hour," his CFO said. "Investors want a statement. The stock's down 40%. Allen rubbed his temples. "And what do they expect me to say? That we shaved a woman's dignity and now we're shocked the world noticed?" The PR director spoke timidly. If you issue a direct apology, public, emotional, it might slow the outrage, maybe even appeal to Dr. Thompson for leniency. Allen looked up sharply. Leniency? You think this woman is looking for mercy? She built the damn system that caught us. She's not negotiating. She's teaching. He stood abruptly and walked to the window. Below, the city glimmered with morning light, oblivious to his ruin. Find her, he said. I don't care how. I want to speak to her before Washington does. Across town, in a federal office filled with screens and tired analysts, Maya reviewed the flood of data Vega had generated in the past 24 hours. Dozens of airlines were now under preliminary audits. Some welcomed it quietly. Others panicked. But Silverwing remained the center of gravity, the case everyone would remember. Sarah entered with 2 cups of coffee and a knowing look. He's calling again, she said. Victor Allen. 3 times this morning. Maya didn't look up. Let him call. He says he wants to apologize personally. Maya sighed. No, he wants to save face personally. Sarah hesitated. The secretary says he's requesting mediation. It's protocol. I know, Maya said, setting down her tablet. Schedule it. I want it recorded. When Allen arrived that afternoon, his usual arrogance was gone, replaced by the hollow energy of a man clinging to the last rung of a collapsing ladder. He entered the conference room with his lawyers, who immediately began to talk about rebuilding trust and moving forward constructively. Maya waited for them to finish before she spoke. Mr. Allen, she said evenly, what exactly do you hope to accomplish here? He exhaled, shoulders sagging. A beginning, he said. Some way to make this right. The public doesn't understand how much damage this is doing to families, to employees who had nothing to do with this. They understand perfectly, Maya replied. They're just no longer willing to ignore it. Allen rubbed his face, the mask of professionalism slipping. You don't know what it's like to have everything crumble overnight. Maya's voice stayed calm. No, Mr. Allen. I know exactly what that's like. It happened to me 30,000 feet in the air, with the world laughing. He lowered his eyes. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the hum of Washington traffic filled the silence. I'll do whatever you ask, he said finally. Public apology, restitution, training programs. Just tell me what it takes to lift the suspension. It's not about the suspension, Maya said. It's about the standard. His lawyer interjected. With all due respect, Dr. Thompson, our client has acknowledged wrongdoing. There must be a path to resolution. There is, she said. It's called accountability, and it doesn't come with conditions. Allen's voice broke. You want me to beg? I want you to learn, she said simply. He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. There was no gloating in her eyes, no hunger for power, only the calm of someone who had already won something deeper. We'll cooperate fully, he said, his voice quiet now. But if you destroy us, what changes? You'll have another victory speech and 1,000 people will lose their jobs. You'll be right, but nothing will be better. Maya studied him, considering. You're wrong, she said. It's not about destroying you. It's about forcing you to rebuild differently. That's the only way anything ever changes. Later, as the meeting ended, he stood at the door, hesitating. Dr. Thompson, he said softly, I've spent my life thinking control was leadership. Turns out it's the opposite. She met his eyes. Control hides fear. Leadership faces it. That night, social media exploded again. Someone leaked the first line of Silverwing's internal memo. Effective immediately, Silverwing accepts full responsibility for its failure to protect passenger dignity. The words spread faster than any apology ever had. Not because they were perfect, but because the world had already seen what imperfection looked like. Jenny watched the broadcast from her small apartment. Her hands shook as she turned up the volume. Alyssa's mugshot flashed across the screen, her eyes red, her mouth drawn tight with disbelief. Chad's photo followed, then the words federal charges pending. Jenny set her phone down, guilt washing over her again. She whispered into the empty room. I hope she forgives me. At that same hour, Maya sat in her office overlooking the Capitol. The city outside was alive with evening noise, horns, footsteps, the restless hum of change. On her desk, her phone buzzed with messages from journalists and senators. She ignored them all, focusing instead on the soft ping of new emails coming from ordinary people. Teachers, flight attendants, mothers. Messages like, thank you for not yelling. You showed grace when they showed hate. Her assistant knocked softly. They're ready for you upstairs, Sarah said. The congressional briefing. Maya stood, straightened her blazer, and took a deep breath. Let's go remind them what this is really about. When she entered the hearing chamber, a hush fell over the crowd. Cameras clicked, senators murmured. She took her seat at the witness table, adjusted the microphone, and began. This isn't about one airline, she said. It's about a system that confuses professionalism with prejudice. We cannot claim to fly safely if dignity is optional. As she spoke, her voice carried through the hall. Not loud, not fiery, but steady, the kind of calm that commands attention without demanding it. People leaned forward to listen. Some nodded. Others shifted uncomfortably. But everyone knew they were hearing something bigger than a scandal. They were hearing a reckoning. When she finished, applause broke out, not the thunderous kind, but quiet, respectful, almost reverent. Reporters would later call it the moment the room exhaled. Walking back to her office afterward, Maya felt the weight she'd been carrying for days begin to lift. She looked up through the glass ceiling of the rotunda. The night sky stretched wide and dark, the stars faint but visible. Somewhere up there, beyond the noise and the scrutiny, was the same sky that had once held her humiliation, and now held her victory. She whispered under her breath, "We didn't just land safely, we changed the route." And for the first time since that flight, she smiled, not for the cameras, not for history, but for herself. Rain drummed against the wide windows of the federal press room, the kind of steady rhythm that turned every conversation into a whisper. Journalists had gathered again, clutching notepads and cameras, waiting for Dr. Maya Thompson to take the podium. Her name had become a symbol. Some called her a hero, others a disruption, but no one denied she had changed the direction of an entire industry. As she stepped up to the microphone, the flash of cameras turned the air electric. She didn't clear her throat or shuffle her notes. She just looked out at the sea of faces and began, her voice even but unyielding. I was humiliated 30,000 feet above the ground, she said. Not because of my job, not because of my title, but because of who I am. And I decided that moment wouldn't end with silence. It would end with change. For a second, the room was quiet enough to hear the rain hitting the glass. Then she continued, weaving between calm authority and something deeper, older, a tired patience that had seen too many apologies with no action. We've spent decades calling discrimination an accident, she said. It's not. It's a system built from habits that people stop questioning. Silverwing was just one symptom. The disease runs through every boardroom that sees diversity as decoration and dignity as optional. When the press conference ended, her words spread across every network. In homes and offices, people who had never cared about aviation policy found themselves listening. Some cried quietly. Others argued that it had gone too far, but no one could escape the conversation. In a dim control room at Silverwing's training center, new employees sat watching her speech as part of mandatory bias education. The old training videos had been replaced by a new module, her module, called Dignity in Flight. A narrator's voice said softly, "Respect isn't protocol, it's survival." The faces of the trainees flickered under the light of the screen. Some looked uncomfortable. One young man raised his hand after the video ended. "So, what happens if someone slips up?" The instructor paused, then replied, "The same thing that happens when a plane ignores an engine warning. You don't wait for the crash to take it seriously." Meanwhile, Maya sat in her office reviewing a report from the Department of Transportation. It listed changes already underway, new oversight boards, anonymous reporting systems, revised grooming policies. It wasn't perfection, but it was movement, and that mattered. Sarah entered with 2 cups of coffee and placed one on her desk. "They want you to keynote at the Aviation Ethics Summit next month," she said. "The White House is calling it historic." Maya gave a small, tired smile. "History only matters if people learn from it," she said. "Otherwise, it's just repetition." Later that afternoon, she met with a group of women in a community center near the airport. Mechanics, gate agents, flight attendants, most of them women of color, most of them with stories that sounded too familiar. They talked about whispered insults, hair policies, and promotions that never came. One woman, older, with gray streaks through her curls, said quietly, We didn't need someone to fight for us. We just needed someone they couldn't ignore. Maya reached across the table, taking her hand. Then let's make sure they keep listening, she said. That night, as she walked to her car, a man called out from the shadows of the parking lot. She turned startled, but he raised his hands quickly. Dr. Thompson, he said. I used to work for Silverwing, maintenance crew. His voice was hesitant, but his eyes were earnest. I wanted to say thank you. They treated us like ghosts before, like we didn't exist. But now they have to look at us. She nodded, moved in a way she hadn't expected. I didn't do this alone, she said. He smiled. No, ma'am, but you started it. When she got home, she poured herself a cup of tea and stood by the window. The city shimmered with life, reflecting off puddles on the street. Her television murmured softly in the background. Commentators arguing, analyzing, praising, criticizing. None of it mattered. What mattered was that for once, silence didn't win. Across the country, change rippled through the industry. Airlines quietly rewrote their policies. Lawyers drafted anti-discrimination clauses. And HR departments scrambled to find the right consultants. Silverwing's remaining board members released a second apology, this one without excuses. We cannot undo what we allowed, but we can rebuild what we destroyed. It ran as a full-page ad in major newspapers, right beside a photo of Maya's calm face at the hearing. At the same time, backlash brewed online. Some accused her of overreach, of destroying livelihoods for a moment of pride. She read some of the comments late one night, the cruelty familiar yet strangely hollow. She didn't reply. Instead, she opened an email from a high school principal in Detroit. Our students watched your testimony in class today, it read. They said they've never seen power used so quietly. She leaned back in her chair and let that line settle in her chest. Quiet power. That was all she had ever wanted, to prove that change didn't need shouting, only steadiness. A week later, Congress announced new hearings to draft the Passenger Dignity Act. Maya was named chief advisor. Reporters asked her if she thought it would pass. It will, she said, because it has to. On the day of the first legislative session, Jenny Moore stood outside the Capitol steps, clutching a folder of witness notes. When Maya saw her, she smiled warmly. You came. Jenny nodded nervously. You said to tell the truth. That's all that's ever needed, Maya said. Inside, the halls echoed with the sound of cameras and footsteps. Jenny testified about what she saw that night, voice trembling at first, then growing stronger. She didn't yell, Jenny said, her eyes wet. She didn't fight back. She just looked at us like she knew how this would end, like she was already writing the next chapter. When the session adjourned, reporters swarmed the steps again, but Maya guided Jenny through quietly. You did well, she said. You gave the story its ending. Jenny smiled shyly. Is it really over? Maya looked up at the sky above Washington, streaked with pale clouds. No, she said, but for the first time, it's flying in the right direction. As they walked away, traffic roared and sirens blared in the distance, the noise of a world still learning, still imperfect. Yet somewhere within it, Maya felt a fragile calm settle. The world hadn't changed overnight, but it had begun to listen. And for her, that was enough. The world had finally begun to slow down. The hearings were over, the flash of cameras had faded, and the noise that had followed Maya for weeks began to dim into something almost peaceful. She sat alone in her office late one evening, the soft hum of the city outside filtering through the window. The desk before her was cluttered with documents, reports, new policies, letters from strangers, but her eyes rested on a single object, a comb. It was carved from dark wood, worn smooth with age. Her mother's comb. She picked it up, running her fingers along its teeth. It had been years since she'd carried it, yet now it felt heavier, weighted with memory. She could still hear her mother's voice, soft but firm. Every curl on your head is a story, Maya. Don't let anyone cut your story short. She smiled faintly at the thought. The irony of it was almost poetic, how her humiliation had become the reason no one else's story would be cut again. The door creaked open and Sarah peeked in. You're still here? Maya nodded, setting the comb down. Just finishing up. You need rest, Sarah said gently. You've done more in a month than most people do in a lifetime. Maya smiled. Rest isn't easy when you're rebuilding a sky. Sarah sat across from her. The papers are calling you the architect of dignity. You've become the face of change, Maya. How does that feel? It feels. Maya hesitated. It feels too big. I didn't do this alone. The system worked because people inside it wanted it to. Sarah studied her for a moment. You really believe that? I have to, Maya said. If I don't, it means nothing changes. The silence between them was comfortable, like an old friendship that didn't need filling. After a while, Sarah stood, squeezing her shoulder gently. Go home, she said. Sleep. The sky will still be there in the morning. When Maya finally left the office, the night air was crisp. The city lights shimmered on wet pavement, and somewhere in the distance, a plane climbed through the clouds. She stopped to watch it disappear into the dark, the sound fading into a low hum. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to feel something like peace. A few days later, she stood before a small group of employees at the Silver Wing Rehabilitation Center. It wasn't a courtroom or a press conference, just a plain meeting room filled with folding chairs and uncertain faces. Former flight attendants, security staff, supervisors, some suspended, some reassigned. Among them was Jenny, seated in the front row, her eyes filled with quiet gratitude. Maya began without preamble. I didn't come here to lecture, she said. I came because the law can punish behavior, but it can't rewrite conscience. That's your work to do. A man in the back raised his hand. How do you forgive people who don't ask for forgiveness? Maya thought for a long moment before answering. You don't forgive them for their sake. You forgive them so they can't hold power over your peace anymore. The man nodded slowly, eyes lowered. Jenny watched her, absorbing every word. After the meeting, she approached quietly. I wanted to tell you, I'm leaving the airline, she said. I got a position with the Civil Rights Division. They said they were impressed by my statement. Maya's face softened into a genuine smile. Good. Use your voice. Don't ever let fear make you small again. Jenny's eyes shimmered. You changed my life, Dr. Thompson. No, Maya said gently. You changed your own. I just reminded you that you could. That night, she returned home to find a letter waiting on her doorstep. It was from Alyssa Green. The handwriting was careful, almost trembling. Maya hesitated before opening it. Dr. Thompson, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect you to read this. I've lost my job, my reputation, and for a long time, I told myself I didn't deserve this. But I do. Watching the footage again broke something in me. I saw my own face, how proud I looked. I don't know who that woman was. I just know I don't ever want to be her again. Thank you for teaching me what silence can cost. Maya read it twice before folding it back into the envelope. She didn't feel triumph or anger, just a deep, quiet ache. Growth was painful, even for those who deserved it, maybe especially for them. The next morning, she visited a small salon on the south side of town. The owner, a middle-aged woman named Ruth, greeted her warmly. Girl, you finally coming in for a touch-up? I saw you on TV making the whole world pay attention. Maya laughed. I thought I'd stop hiding behind a messy bun. Ruth draped the cape over her shoulders and began to trim carefully. You know, she said, back when they made me straighten my hair for work, I used to dream about a day like this, when somebody up there would say enough is enough. Maya closed her eyes as the scissors moved through her curls. It shouldn't take humiliation to make change. No, it shouldn't, Ruth said softly, but sometimes God uses pain to plant seeds. Look at you now. You're the tree. When she left the salon, her hair was shaped neatly, the uneven patches gone. She caught her reflection in a shop window and almost didn't recognize herself. Not because she looked different, but because she looked whole again. Back at her apartment, she placed Alyssa's letter in a drawer with the wooden comb. Then she opened her laptop and drafted a new proposal, a program to promote women of color into leadership positions within federal aviation. She named it the Thompson Initiative. The sun dipped low outside, turning the city gold. As she typed, she whispered softly to the empty room, You didn't cut me down. You just cleared the way for growth. When the first stars appeared over the skyline, she finally stopped working. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes closing with a kind of peace she hadn't felt in years. For all the noise and pain that had come before, there was quiet now, steady, sacred quiet. And somewhere far above, another flight crossed the sky, silver against the fading light. It moved smooth and sure, untouched by turbulence, as if even the heavens had learned something about dignity. A year later, the airport didn't look different, But it felt different, the way a house feels after a storm. Same walls, new quiet. Signs posted near security read, "Passenger dignity standards enforced." The grooming poster that used to show slicked hair and corporate smiles had been replaced by a collage of real travelers, braids, curls, head wraps, gray afros, shining under soft light. People still rushed and argued, lost their tempers over carry-ons and gate changes, but beneath the noise there was a new kind of caution, a new kind of care, like someone had finally taught the sky to use its inside voice. Maya stood in the first-class line with a small rolling suitcase and a worn leather briefcase. No one blinked at her boarding pass. No one asked if she knew she was in the right cabin. The agent scanned her ticket and said, with easy warmth, "Have a good flight, Dr. Thompson." The words were simple, but they landed with a quiet grace that felt like a ribbon being tied at the end of a long braid. She thanked the agent and walked down the jetway, the cool air touching her cheeks. Seat 2A again. She smiled at the symmetry, running a hand over the armrest like a pianist greeting an old instrument. The cabin lighting glowed a gentle gold. A young attendant with a tidy bun and a name badge that read Marisol stopped at her row and spoke softly. "Welcome aboard. If you need anything, please tell me. We're honored to have you." There was no performative flourish, only sincerity. Maya nodded. Water would be perfect. Marisol brought it in a real glass, not plastic, placing a linen napkin beneath, as if dignity were something you set gently on the table between strangers. Across the aisle, a teenager recognized her and whispered to his father, who whispered back, "Let her fly, son." Maya kept her gaze on the window, the runway glinting in late morning light. She could see the ghost of her reflection in the glass, short curls shaped neatly now, a face older than it had been a year ago, and somehow softer too. Her phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. Bill passed the Senate. 7228. President signs this afternoon. Wheels up and history made, boss. Maya smiled and typed back. History is just people doing the right thing long enough. A voice broke through the intercom, smooth and steady. "Good morning, folks. This is your captain." A pause, then a warm shift she recognized not by name but by intention. "It's an honor to say we have Dr. Maya Thompson on board today. Ma'am, on behalf of this crew, thank you for giving the sky a better compass." A murmur rolled through the cabin. No applause, no theatrics, just a hush of respect. Marisol touched Maya's shoulder lightly. "That was our captain, El Alvarez. She's been hoping you'd fly with us." Taxi, turn, the small lurch of commitment as the plane aligned itself with the world. As they lifted, the earth fell away in the familiar tilt that shortened breath and lengthened horizons. Houston turned to quilt, then to memory. Clouds swallowed the wings and peeled away again, the blue above them so calm it felt intentional. When the seatbelt sign turned off, an older woman from coach made her careful way forward, escorted by Marisol. She wore a Navy church hat and low heels not built for airplanes. "I'm sorry," she said, embarrassed by her own boldness. "I asked if I might speak to you. They said if you were willing." Maya stood, steadying the woman's arm. "Of course." The woman's eyes shone like she had saved this for years. "I marched in '63, she said. "These bones remember dogs and hoses and names that never got their due. I'm proud of you, baby. You kept your head high, and the world finally had to lift its eyes." Maya held her hands, the plane humming around them, and said, "I only walked because you cleared the road." They stood like that a moment longer, 2 chapters acknowledging each other before turning the page. Back in her seat, she opened the folder on her lap and reviewed the final draft of the Passenger Dignity Act. Words that had once lived as stubborn hopes were now clauses and subclauses, reporting mechanisms with teeth, training with metrics, penalties that would outlast any press cycle. It wasn't perfect, nothing built by humans is, but it was sturdy. It would carry weight. She initialed the margin beside an implementation timeline and closed the folder. Outside, the sky made its own quiet signatures across the wing. Marisol returned with coffee and a note written on a napkin. "My mother cleaned planes at night when I was little. She used to say, 'Someday somebody will make them see us.'" "You did." Maya tucked the napkin into her briefcase next to the wooden comb and Alyssa's letter, memory and change riding side by side. Hours later, as they descended into Seattle, the pilot skimmed them over a lake so blue it felt freshly poured. The wheels kissed the runway with a gentleness you can't teach, and the cabin breathed as one. When the chime sounded, people stood in no particular hurry. No one rushed to crowd her aisle. A man in a business suit nodded as if to a neighbor he was grateful to live beside. The teenager across the way gave her a thumbs up he tried and failed to make casual. Even that felt like progress. At the door, Captain Alvarez waited, weathered hands on the frame, eyes kind and amused. She looked like someone who trusted the sky enough to argue with it when needed. "Dr. Thompson," she said, "I learned to fly in a world that thought pilots should all look the same. Thank you for breaking the lock instead of the door." Maya smiled. "Thank you for landing us all, even before we knew we were coming down." The captain laughed softly. "We don't always get to choose the weather, but we sure as hell choose how we fly through it." Outside the jet bridge, a small crowd of airport employees stood quietly as she passed. Not a ceremony, nobody clapped, but a line of living acknowledgments. A fueler lifted 2 fingers from his cap. A gate agent with silver hair nodded and swallowed. A baggage handler with grease under his nails said, "Ma'am," like it was a prayer. She answered each gesture with a look meant to say, "I see you too." She rode the escalator down to arrivals, the whir of rubber steps beneath her feet, the smell of coffee and rain-soaked coats wrapping around the hall. News screens along the wall carried the president's pen, the signature long and unmistakable. A chyron below it read, "Signed, the Passenger Dignity Act." People barely looked up from their lives to register it, which struck her as the purest kind of victory, when the thing that once seemed impossible becomes background, assumed, and ordinary. Sarah met her at the car with a grin that belonged to a friend more than an aide. "Madam Architect," she teased, "congratulations on federal ink." Maya rolled her eyes. "It's not mine, it's ours." They drove in a pleasant quiet, the kind that doesn't require talk to mean anything. Near the water, the city stretched into evening, soft lights in windows, gulls carving their signatures through low clouds. They stopped at a community center where a small plaque gleamed just inside the door. The Thompson Initiative, Leadership Pathways for Women of Color in Aviation. They were holding the first scholarship reception tonight. On a folding table sat name tags and punch in a crystal bowl that had seen many graduations and more church basements. A girl no older than 20 beamed as Maya entered. "Dr. Thompson, I'm starting as an avionics tech next month." Her braids framed a face that could not contain its future. "My granddad fixed crop dusters. He says I'm the family's moonshot." Maya hugged her and said, "Tell your granddad the moon's got nothing on you." Later, after the speeches and the laughter and the paper plates stacked like small victories, Maya walked alone to the pier. The water lapped at pilings with that careful patience only tides know. She took the wooden comb from her bag and held it like a relic and a tool. She thought of the night a year ago when scissors had tried to make a spectacle of her, and how a quieter instrument, protocols, laws, a spine kept straight, had done its work instead. Behind her, someone approached. She didn't turn. The footsteps stopped and a soft voice said, "You did it without shouting." Maya smiled at the water. "Noise burns quick," she said. "Steadiness lights the way home." A plane passed overhead then, low enough to stir a breeze across her face. She looked up and saw the belly of it catching late sun, polished to a mirror that showed the sky back to itself. In that reflection, for the briefest second, she saw a woman seated by a window, not legendary or untouchable, just human and unbroken, traveling like everyone else from one place to another. She lifted a hand in a small wave, to no one and to anyone, and the moment moved on. When she headed back, the city sounded like it always had, horns, voices, the clatter of dishes behind diner glass. But somewhere inside the noise was a new room carved out for quiet. Not silence born of fear, but the hush you get in a sanctuary when people understand why they are there. She carried it with her, this earned quiet, like a passport she didn't have to show anymore. At home, she placed the comb beside the napkin and the letter, a little altar of what it takes to cross hard distances. She poured tea and stood by the window until the steam joined the night. A message blinked on her phone from an unknown number. "My little girl wears her curls to school now." "Thank you." She typed back. "Tell her the sky learned to mind its manners," and set the phone down. Somewhere above, another flight stitched a bright line through the dark, the seam holding. The world was still flawed, still loud, still learning, but the route had changed. She closed her eyes and listened, and in the soft distance she heard what she had been working toward all along, a sky that knew better, and people choosing, one small decision at a time, to fly right.